Hi.
It's me, Coraline. Hi friends, it's Shelby. Today I thought I would talk about Coraline's birth story. I have it in her little baby book for when she's older, and I also have it written in my phone so that I can look down and refer to this so that I can remember everything. It was really hard to remember exactly what happened and what time things were happening because I kind of just, it was all a blur and I kind of felt like I wasn't really there. It was kind of like almost like an out-of-body experience, I guess you'd say. So I do have everything written down. With the help of my mom and Danny, I was able to get everything written down at about the same time that I think things actually happened. So hopefully this is as accurate as it can be. So I started contracting at 7 a.m. on Thursday, September 19th. I had a scheduled doctor appointment that day, and at the appointment I was only 1.5 centimeters dilated, but I was 70% effaced, so that's good. But that was just about the same that I had been the week before. And I told my doctor that morning I thought I was having some contractions. I almost thought they were Braxton Hicks, but they weren't going away with like drinking water and like getting up and walking around. They were just steady, a little bit annoying, but nothing crazy. I had them all morning. And I told my doctor, and she said that was normal, and she didn't seem convinced that the baby was going to be born anytime soon. So we live a bit farther from the hospital where I wanted to have Coraline. We live like an hour away, and we were living in an apartment that was maybe like 20 minutes away from the hospital where I wanted to have Coraline. But when we found out that we were pregnant, we decided that we wanted to finally get our first home. And the only home that we were able to afford and that we really liked was actually an hour away from the hospital. So I had met all of the doctors that were in the practice, and they all seemed pretty nice, and I wanted to be able to have one of those doctors deliver me. So I wanted to stay within the practice, stay with that hospital that we had originally planned to have her at, but we found a house that was about an hour away. So Danny and I had talked about trying to be as close as possible to that hospital when I felt that I was in early labor. So we wanted to be nearby. So we kind of felt like maybe I was in early labor. So we decided to kind of hang around in the area for a little while, and we decided to go to the Panera that was nearby. And we walked around Target, because I love Target. And I continued to have contractions, but I wasn't tracking them yet. I was still able to talk and walk through them. I remember specifically at Target, we were in an aisle, and I just had to kind of just stand for a minute and just breathe for a sec, because it was definitely starting to be more than a little annoying. Not like super painful, but more than annoying. But I still wasn't tracking them yet, so I wasn't exactly sure if they were really consistent. So at this point, we weren't exactly sure if it was true labor or if I was just having some really hardcore like Braxton Hicks contractions and they would just kind of go away, because like I said, they were kind of inconsistent and I wasn't tracking them at that time. So we started to head back to the house, but my contractions were starting to get worse, and we decided, I was kind of flip-flopping back and forth, like, oh, do we want to go back home? Is this just like a false alarm? Or, oh my god, am I actually in labor right now? What do we do? And Danny was like so patient with me, and he's like, do you want to go back? Do you want to keep going home? Do you want to go home and take a shower? Do you want to go back to your mom's? What do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I never had a baby before. I don't know what's happening. So my mom actually lives pretty close to the hospital that we wanted to have Cora at, and we decided early on that we were going to early labor at her house so that we could be nearby. And I was just like, you know what? I think I need you to turn around and go to my mom's. So we ended up going to my mom's. So at my mom's, I continued to have contractions, and I actually started timing them with an app. If I can remember what the app was, I will link that down below. So my contractions were mostly about a minute long, but they were still pretty inconsistent with the time between them. So that went on for a couple hours. Maybe we got to her house maybe around like 5 or 6 maybe. And that went on until about 10 p.m. So I asked Danny to go ahead and call my doctor to see if we should start thinking about maybe coming into the hospital. And she just told us that if I can no longer talk or walk through the contractions, then I should come in. But at that time, I was still able to talk, and I didn't want to walk. Like, it wasn't fun to walk around, but I still could. Like, if I needed to go to the bathroom or something, I still could. So it was a really long night for me. We ended up staying at my mom's the whole night. Contractions were about every 5 to 8 minutes, making it impossible for me to get any kind of sleep. In the early hours in the morning, I started to actually throw up, and I don't know if that's just because normally throughout my pregnancy, I would have snacks like every hour or so I would have a snack, so that my stomach was never empty, because that made me throw up even more. I know that my stomach was empty, so what was I gonna throw up? But like, I would throw up like water, or I would just like gag for no reason. But honestly, I didn't feel like eating because I was having these painful contractions. So I don't know exactly if I started throwing up because of the pain or because I hadn't eaten in a long time. And I actually ended up throwing maybe 5 times before we decided to call the doctor a second time and see if we could finally just come in. So by the time I was starting to get sick and we finally were able to call the doctor, it was about 12:30 p.m. The next day, on Friday, the 20th, and that was actually Coraline's due date. So after hearing about the fact that I was throwing up, the phone nurse that we got on the phone told us to go ahead to the hospital. So once we were there, I was wheeled to triage, and in the lobby on the way to triage, I just felt like a rush of emotions. I did not feel good. I was hurting. I was nervous and scared and actually kind of embarrassed. I started actually kind of like hyperventilating a little bit. I remember the man at the desk checking us in was like, "Is she okay?" And my mom's like, "Yeah, she's okay. She's just really nervous. And it's her first baby, like, she's okay." But I'm just like sobbing. I'm just like sitting there in the wheelchair like, I don't know. So we got checked in and everything around 1:45 on Friday. And we waited for a while for someone to see me. I just went into a little room and I got in a little gown and I lay down on a bed. It was like a shared room with like a curtain for other people who could come into triage. And I was actually kind of nervous because it was so packed in the labor and delivery department that day that I didn't even know if like I was going to be able to stay, if I had to go to another hospital. I didn't know what was going to happen because I think they said that every bed was full. There were lots of babies that day. So then someone arrived to check me, and by that point I was 4 centimeters and 90% effaced. So it took me from Thursday around 7 a.m. to Friday about 1:45 for me to go from 1.5 centimeters and 70% effaced to 4 centimeters and 90% effaced. The nurse suggested that I just stay in triage for an hour to see how I'm progressing, and she said I could walk the halls a little bit and see how much I can progress before I actually get checked in for real in a real room. But when she came back a little bit over an hour later, I was 6 centimeters. So in 1 hour, I went from 4 centimeters to 6 centimeters, and I was fully effaced. And so then I was admitted. So then I was taken to have active labor in a delivery room. And not long after I got there, I was able to get my epidural, and that is something that I wanted to get. And I was pretty anxious to get the epidural. I knew that it would probably hurt, and I knew that I had to stay perfectly still because you need to have a still, straight spine so that they can inject the medicine into the spinal column correctly. It is pretty hard to stay still when you know that someone is about to stick a needle in your back. So my nurse said that I could hold on to her as the procedure was being done, and I did. I held on to her so hard, and she was so sweet about it. She didn't even care that I was like squeezing her. And actually the numbing shot and the epidural actually had to be done twice because my spine wasn't in the right position for some reason. I think it has something to do with like the fact that I had such a huge belly at that time, and I also have a really short torso. So because of my short torso, I couldn't really hunch over enough for the person to inject it into the right place. So that was kind of difficult, and it had to be done twice, but finally it got in there. The epidural was flowing, and I could not feel a thing from like my belly button down. And the epidural worked really well. I couldn't really feel very much pressure when the contractions came. I remember them saying, you might feel a little bit of pressure, but it won't be pain. But honestly, for me, I didn't really feel much of anything at all. But I did have a reaction to the epidural. It just made me shake, like uncontrollably. Just shake as if I was like shivering as if I was cold, but I wasn't cold. So by this time I was getting pretty hungry, and I was actually allowed to drink clear liquids like water, and I was able to eat Jello. And I didn't know that you were actually allowed to eat in the delivery room. A lot of things that I've read said that you cannot eat anything, but they offered me Jello, so I don't know. But for some reason, of all things, this Jello like gave me heartburn. I don't know why. Like, I had such horrible heartburn when I was pregnant with Coraline, but this Jello like made it even worse, and I threw up my Jello. So I'm just gonna be real with you guys. This next part is about getting a catheter. So if you don't want to hear about that, you can skip a couple minutes because I'm gonna talk about getting a catheter. So I had to get a catheter because obviously I couldn't get up and go to the bathroom if I needed to pee, so they had to put that in there. And during that time, I just kept on thinking about the Austin Powers movie where he gets cryogenically frozen, and then in the unfreezing process, he just won't stop peeing, and it goes on and on and on for like a ridiculous amount of time. It just really made me think of that, and I could not stop giggling. Like, I could not stop. It was just like me and Danny and this nurse giving me this catheter, and we're all just sitting there silently in the room, and she has like a little tub, a little bucket, and we're just listening to me pee. And it was pretty awkward, and I just couldn't stop laughing because I was thinking about Austin Powers the whole time. So at 8:15 p.m. I was still at 6 centimeters, and I hadn't had much progression. And they said that Cora's water bag was actually just like hanging out a little bit. So the nurses punctured it with this little thing that kind of looked like a crochet hook. They punctured it in the hopes that it would kind of make my dilation move a little bit faster. And it was just a trickle. It wasn't like a huge gush like in a movie or something. It was just a little trickle. And maybe that's just because I didn't have a whole lot of water in there. So then at 8:40 p.m., there still wasn't much progress happening. So they wanted to start me on Pitocin, so I got hooked up to that. So then around 12 a.m., that would have been Saturday then, the 21st, I was checked again, and I was finally fully dilated at 10 centimeters. And I forgot to say that during the time they put me on the Pitocin to really get things moving along faster, they also put me on oxygen as well because Coraline was feeling a little bit in distress. So then once I was dilated fully to 10 centimeters, they had me wait for about an hour, and then it was finally time to push at 1 a.m. And during that hour, I did some practice pushes with a nurse, and Danny were holding my legs, but I really felt like those pushes, I wasn't really doing anything. Like, it didn't feel like they were like sufficient enough. I just felt like my pushes weren't really doing anything to get Coraline to move down farther, like farther in the birth canal. I just felt like she wasn't moving at all. And I think that's mainly just because I had the epidural and I could not feel what was going on down there. So after about 5 or 6 practice pushes, my doctor came in and a couple other nurses came in, and I can't remember how many. I think it might have been 2 or 3. Coraline wasn't really making her way down the birth canal, and she was actually feeling a bit stressed. So they used something called a vacuum extraction, which it's not actually a vacuum. Like, nothing was like she wasn't like being sucked out by air or anything, but it's more like a suction cup which gets placed on the baby's head, and it is attached to like a cord, and that cord is attached to a device that the doctor holds. So they go in and they place the suction cup on the baby's head, and then they told me to push, and as I pushed, they would pull. The reasoning that the doctor told me they needed to do this was because Coraline was in distress and she wasn't moving down very much or not quick enough because she was having trouble breathing and her heart rate was going down. So they needed to get her out quickly, and I don't think they had enough time to get me prepped and ready for a C-section, or maybe I think it's like the step before a C-section, like they would rather try to do the vacuum first than have to get me prepped and go in and be cut for a C-section. And actually, my doctor didn't actually deliver me. It was I think it was a doctor in training, and like I remember learning everyone's name, and everyone came in and introduced themselves and told me their names, but I can't remember anymore who it was. But it was a younger doctor who was in training. She was up front with all the business, and my doctor was behind her, kind of not like guiding her through. Like I could tell this woman knew what she was doing, but she was definitely a doctor in training. So my doctor was just kind of behind her to basically supervise. So while they were doing the vacuum extraction, that was a pretty strange sensation. I couldn't feel it necessarily. Like I think I felt like tugging, but not painful, and like so faint. And I remember the little suction cup actually popping off of Cora's head twice, and the sound was the strangest, like freaky, squelchy sound that you could ever imagine. And I won't get into details, but I had my eyes closed like the entire time because I was really trying to focus, and I kind of regret keeping my eyes closed the entire time because I feel like I wasn't really there. Like I feel like I wasn't present for my own like child's birth because my eyes were closed. But I was really trying to focus so hard and just trying to get it done. But I'll spare you the details, but Danny said that it was, the vacuum extraction was a messy business. So when Coraline came out, she did have some like scabbing that developed on her head from the vacuum, and she had a big cone head, which I know a lot of vaginal birth babies have little cone heads, but it is completely better, completely healed, no scarring, and now her noggin looks good. Cora also had her face upwards, and normally when you have a vaginal birth, they want the baby's head to be facing downwards because it is an easier exit that way. But she was sunny side up, and she was also kind of at a strange angle, like her head was kind of tilted to the side with her face up and tilted to the side. So they did have to perform an episiotomy to get Coraline out. So if you don't know what an episiotomy is, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. So an episiotomy is where they make an incision to make the opening larger so that the baby has more room to come out. And they do have to stitch you up, and yeah. So even though it felt like an eternity, it actually wasn't that long, and Coraline came earthside at 2:55 a.m. on September 21st. She was 7.5 pounds and 20 inches long. And here's a fun fact. When she was born, her umbilical cord was actually really skinny. It was about 1/3 of the thickness that most other umbilical cords are, and usually they have like some white jelly looking substance all over it, and Coraline's really didn't have much of that. Now, like I said, I kept my eyes closed the entire time because I was really trying to focus, and I couldn't feel when she came out. I didn't feel the cut, I didn't feel the incision, I didn't feel when she came out. I only knew when she was out because everybody was like, oh, here she is, and then they put her on my belly, and that's when I knew she was out and I could open my eyes. But I really didn't see the umbilical cord, but Danny said that there really wasn't much like jelly looking stuff, and I don't remember the name of what that is actually called, the scientific name of that, but she didn't have much. And when she came out, Danny said that the doctors were all kind of looking weird at each other, just kind of glancing at each other with a little bit of a strange look on their faces. And at the time, we didn't know why, but I think it was because of the thinness of the umbilical cord. And actually, when they put Cora on my stomach, I wasn't able to do skin to skin like I wanted, and I wasn't able to do delayed cord clamping because the cord actually snapped, like it broke in two, and they had to pick her up and take her over and get it clamped. And my doctor actually said that she had never seen that before in all the births that she had done. The cord had never been so short that it just broke. So we didn't immediately get to do skin to skin because Coraline was stressed out and she was having trouble breathing. So they took her over to the warmer, they removed the fluid from her mouth and from her nose, and then a NICU nurse came in just to make sure that she was okay. And after a few minutes, Coraline was in the clear and we were finally able to do skin to skin together. So, lucky me, by the end of all of that, I had a 2nd degree tear as well as that episiotomy. My doctor told me that all of the stitches were made under the skin and done with one continuous thread, and they would dissolve over time. And after the birth, I did have a lot of pain. I really wasn't able to walk very well, but it definitely wasn't as bad as it could have been. And Coraline was such a healthy, happy, sweet little baby. I remember all the nurses saying how cute she was and like how good she was and quiet. So I'm really happy that she was healthy and doing well, and her little noggin just went right back to normal. She didn't have any injuries from the vacuum extraction. I know that a lot of babies can get some pretty bad cuts on their head from that, but luckily Coraline just had a few little boo-boos and it wasn't too bad. I think we ended up staying 3 or 4 days in the hospital. We opted to stay 1 extra day because we were allowed to, and we just wanted that time to really let things die down and like get used to having a newborn. And that time in the hospital was actually really nice. Like we were just chilling, talking to family on our phones, having visitors, and you know, having food brought, and it was just nice. It was a really pleasant stay. So I actually calculated how long my labor was. So from beginning to end, like from early labor to when Coraline came out, my labor was 43 hours, which is 1 day plus 19 hours. And active labor from like 6 centimeters to 10 was 13.5 hours. While we were at the hospital, I asked my doctor what was with the whole like skinny cord business and it being so short. And she said she honestly wasn't sure. Like she had never seen it before. And she didn't really have much to say about it. But I was still confused and also a little concerned because I know that when they do the ultrasound where they look at all the different body parts of the baby and they make sure that everything is developing properly, I'm pretty sure that they also look at the umbilical cord. So I was just wondering why they hadn't seen that it was shorter or that it was thinner than other umbilical cords. I was confused. So I looked it up, and it's actually a very rare phenomena. And the one is called short cord syndrome, and then the other one is called thin cord syndrome. I looked them up, and there's only a few case studies about them. It's very rare, and it really makes sense why Coraline was in such distress when I was in labor, because her cord wasn't wrapped around her neck or anything like that, but it was just so thin and short that maybe when my water bag was punctured and all the water came out, maybe it got kind of like compressed, maybe like underneath her, or I don't know, somehow maybe it got compressed, and that might have been why she was having such a hard time when she came out. But yeah, no one said anything about it. No one even noticed it when we had our ultrasounds. So I don't know. I'm glad that everything came out the way that it did, but it could have been a really serious situation. But I am really glad that she came out healthy and she was at a good birth weight, and she didn't have to stay in the NICU, which is awesome. So yeah, while I'm filming this video, she's actually 6 months old. I can't believe it. She's almost a year old. That's wild. But yeah, I just wanted to film this video so that she could have it when she's older, and so that if any of you had similar experiences, I would love to hear about that in the comments. Were any of your baby's cords super thin or super short? Because I know how rare it is, but I don't know. I just find it fascinating, and I would love to know if any of you experienced that as well. So for this video's comment of the day, I would love to know, how long was your labor? Like from active labor to the time the baby was born, how long was that for you? For me, it was 43 hours. Let me know down in the comments how long it was for you. And yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to subscribe for more videos about mommy things, baby things, home improvement, organization, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button if you want to. I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. Bye! Oh my god, I'm not wearing my ring. Be right back. They always stick together. Okay. Hello. Danny just texted me that Cora pooped. So he needs to come in and change her diaper. Come up and change that diaper. Send. Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Just in a room peeing with two friends. And